Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex is a game you may have heard about through your nostalgia trips to the old GameCube era, or even through your own childhood, where this game actually is pretty gosh darn popular. Now, I know the Crash whole brand is not at its peak prime, though you can see things in the future of it kind of going in a decent mannerism since Crash the original to where we are now in, I think it is tag team racing. You look at the trilogy, which I'll get into later, how that's kind of like a revitalization of the series to an extent, but Wrath of Cortex. Let me summarize this for myself and for you. This game is not one that is something that is outlandishly amazing. No, it has quirks, it has issues, it has flaws. Perfectly fine. Every game should. GameCube games, they were much more push these out as fast as we can and kind of grow brands and mascots for the best part of the determination of wording there than anything else. And Crash, well, the same exact mold. The premise behind Crash Wrath of Cortex is nothing crazy or differential from anything we've seen in modern media or even back then. It actually is very close to Sonic, where the premise is, okay, Cortex is coming back, he's this bad guy that's already been pre-existing. This is just the game that most people would start off on Crash because it sold so well, but the basis being, he made Crunch. Crunch being the creation that is meant to destroy Crash, and we've seen this again in a lot of media. Sonic's Shadow. Shadow is meant to destroy Sonic. Metal Sonic's meant to destroy Sonic. We've seen this a lot of media, and this is the same premise. It is a game, you go through the stage, you complete it, and then once you kind of do the objective of getting the crystals and fighting the boss of Crunch in every single stage and getting the mask to get the elementals and yada yada yada, the whole synopsis of the plot line you'll see throughout the background video here, it just boils down to, hey, you run through the stage kind of like Mario, but a little bit different than Mario, and if you're doing anything you enjoy from it, it would be that time trial situation, the more completionist route. This game is much more fulfilled in that depth than, yeah, there's cool abilities like the, and you get 3 masks and then you kind of get the star ability. Again, the best comparison would just be to Mario because that's what everyone knows, right? The Aku Aku mask, which gives you the same abilities, which again, go into more, but if there's any game that has simplicity behind it, and on top of that simplicity actually is pretty unique in character design and wellness of maybe not plot, because again, this plot is a very repeated thing in the early 2000s. It is nonetheless a game a game you probably have tried out or just seen, online, or when you were a kid, you went to, what's that store called? Not Best Buy, but, what was the DVD? You know what I'm talking. The Blue Circle, the DVD, Blockbuster. You went to Blockbuster as a child, you would just see it existing there. You went to Walmart, you went to Target. I don't know what other stores were around the early 2000s, but like, from my recollection, this game was just everywhere. I remember seeing it just kind of looking through a collection, just like, oh, everyone has Crash Bandicoot. Everyone has like a Spyro game, then a Crash game along their, 57 Mario Party, their 82 Mario Karts, their 3 different Sonic games, and then there's just Crash Bandicoot Wrath of Cortex, and it's just like, oh, it must be something decent if it sold over 5 million copies. And I want to get to the details of what it is and kind of where that series has ended off at, and the not the greatest situation for itself and how it's been up until now. Well, disregarding the trilogy. So if you didn't know, fun fact, the actual original game title was supposed to be Crash Bandicoot's World. If you do not know the synopsis of the story, kind of a little rundown, quick breakdown, not full detail, but quick breakdown enough. Crunch, once again, as I stated, is the bad guy. He is created by Dr. Neo Cortex to destroy Crash. So while Crash is Neo Cortex's bad guy, Crunch is our bad guy, as we are playing as Crash. Coco, his sister, I believe is, don't get me, too involved in this, but I think the details would be more that she has a thing for computers, so she could make the artificial places you need to go, in a sense of reality, but isn't it still artificial? She basically allows the game to exist by creating the spaces you have to go to, because there's elementals. So you have Crunch going into a water form, fire form, all these different elemental forms. you're trying to collect the crystals, and from there, once you do collect these crystals, these Aku, Mask also being your kind of companion there. Think of a companion in any game. Look at Yoshi, look at Marth or Ike, look at, their companions in Fire Emblem games. Look at literally any type of companion. Aku is that same exact thing in this franchise here. But you're just trying to beat the bad guy. There really isn't much depth to it. I do think the gameplay actually does help this game more than it would be any other, because this is a very precise game. The situation of the time trials, obviously something very important to it. And again, what I have stated already is just completely foundational to this game, that this is much more a completionist type of thing. You are not here for the full-on story. Yeah, cool, there's villains from the Crash franchise that have existed prior, and they're back. That's great. Awesome. All right, cool. But if we're going to be 100% transparent here, we are here for the precision jumping, the precision, collecting, and again, the 100% route is much more the favor of what this game's design is meant to be, because what it really does is kind of bring you back, I would say, more toward, okay, this jump, it might seem like it's very easy, here to here, but it's like you'll barely, you'll skim that making, right there, but you'll make it. It's just, you gotta be hella precise and hella knowing of what to do. And again, what your main goal is not just to enjoy the story, which you're gonna do, but it would be much more to kind of emulate this more, this NES 5, SNES 5 of these are hard-ass games to get 100% done. The casual side of it, truly easy, nothing crazy. I don't think Crash is that easy, but easy enough, right? But that 100% factor, that is where this game is meant to shine. And just to let you know, I did think Crunch actually was Crash's brother as a kid, because, well, he's made just like him. I was a dumb kid. The reason I want to speak about this game in particular, by the way, just to get out there, is because I do feel this was the last biggest success of an original Crash game. Again, you look at this game, it sold over 5 million copies, I found, throughout all systems, right? I think it was on Xbox, PlayStation 2, and GameCube. I got on GameCube personally. I think I actually had it on Xbox as well, but it was just kind of cheap, I believe, at most times, where I think it was $10 this game at some points. When, younger, a decade ago, this game was, cheap as heck. But I do feel like this is the last greatest success. I'm looking at sales numbers particularly here, because while I have obviously played, again, Tag Team Racing, a pretty solid game, just the spin-off of Crash, right? Every kind of franchise that's like this is trying to get their own spin-off, trying to get their own, big break type of thing going on there. I do feel that there hasn't been much success in this franchise afterwards. Well, yeah, there's been kind of some hits, but it's been mostly misses, and I kind of want to go through the detail of what got back from where we were of 5 million copies sold to where we are now, where I think Crash is averaging, again, new Crash games, I'm only talking about new ones, because redoing trilogies and old games is a very common thing we're seeing nowadays, and, well, they succeed. So, new games of the same old, big, I guess you could call, mascots, or attempting to be big mascots. Look at Spyro, look at Crash, not looking at Mario and Sonic, because those are established mascots already. They were pre-established, and they were much more from their own, peak games, with Sonic Adventure, Paper Mario, Super Mario, whatever. Those were already, getting their stride and already having a stride prior. Crash and Spyro, though, these are two franchises, well, they have been okay at points, and even great at one. Again, I'm here to kind of go over what made those, in those sequences, this one being Crash, what made it as successful as it became in its peak game of Crash Wrath of Cortex, at least in my opinion. I think that's the greatest game that Crash has ever created in that mascot era of Crash Bandicoot. But also what they can do to kind of revitalize that, because they need that. I mean, it's a fun franchise. It's just, I don't think they have much direction. In a summary, the Crash Bandicoot Wrath of Cortex, while it is a fun game, a good game, and a nice game, it does give me a little bit of, I guess, pity for what has become of Crash nowadays. Again, I'm not trying to dog on it too bad. I am obviously giving my take of how it is falling down, and that's not supposed to be subjective. That's much more objective. Again, you just look at the sales. They'll probably be right here anyways. You look at what's going on. There is not much of differential. It's much more a repeated loop. Again, I kind of going on a very specific point here where I'm saying, yes, I do think that Crash is much more a gameplay-oriented series of what it's kind of become and its success that it's had prior, but repeating that same gameplay over and over and over, it's silly. It's not something that's consistent. It's not something that could even have a potential for growth. Even modernizing to an extent and making it a game that is much more compatible with the current era of the times, whether it be a very fast pace, you got to react, quick time event, this, that, and the other, because a lot of the attention span, I would say, has dwindled just in youth, because look at, we have Twitter, TikTok, we got all these apps, so it's like there literally factually is lower attention span in youth. And I would say anybody under like the age of 18 right now probably has like a third or a quarter of the attention span of people that are older than that, because again, you just look around the world, what is going on with it, and everything else is much more fast. It's fast. So what we want to do, change the pacing. Crash, there's some sequences where you've seen a lot of things, even in the trilogy, where it's just you're a little bit waiting while it is like, okay, there's boulders chasing you and I gotta run away from it. Alright, it's not really a full threat. Like, yeah, the precision and the depth perception of the jumps could be a little bit tricky, annoying, hairy to deal with, but you learn through time to get over that. But no, I don't want that to be the end. I don't want it to be, okay, after the first or second world or stage or whatever it would be in that specific game, I don't want it to be after that first or second world where it's just like, okay, I've learned all these mechanics, now I am chilling. I learned how to slide, I learned how to run and slide at the same time, I learned how to do this, that, and the other. Keep implementing it. I don't want the full game mechanics to be implemented until World 6 out of World 10. I don't know, why not World 10? It's usually World 8. Change it up. Change it up. We don't have to keep following this formulaic situation. Well, again, I say that, I do think sticking to a formula of following past games that have had success and implementing mechanics similar to, not copying, similar to what they've done. Again, I will keep referencing Super Mario Sunshine as I can, because that game is such a good game of gameplay mechanics, mediocre story. Crash could follow suit in that, even to this today's standard, if it just modernizes those mechanics of goodness and more so expands on them. I do hope the Crash trilogy and everything that came from with the success does allow, it was a few years ago to be fair, does allow for at least some exponential situation of expansion going on in Crash, kind of allowing their development to be much more lenient or much more, I guess, cared for to an extent. Because you see, I talked about other games here. Paper Mario, you can see there's heart care in that. Sonic Adventure, you see there's heart care in that. More in the story of those two, but still there's heart and care even in the gameplay. It's not bad gameplay at all. It's just the story's also really good. On top of it, the story's better, but the gameplay's not bad. Crash, it's a mediocre story, maybe okay at times, maybe, but then the gameplay is just go over and over and over. And as I mentioned already, that is not what is conducive to growth. You can't expect that to work. Implementing new features, implementing new, and I know this sounds very obvious, but they haven't done it. That's why I'm saying it. Implementing new features, implementing new ways for players to be like, oh, that's like, what the heck? Like, I want to see a Twitter clip of Crash, new Crash game. Boom, has 600k views from X Twitter user Bobby Lee 20 and he's just like, what the hell happened here? And he's just, something crazy happened in Crash. Why can't I see that? I see the other games. I see that on Sonic right now, and Sonic has nothing. There's literally nothing Sonic-wise that's happening, and I see Sonic clips daily on Twitter. So why can't I see this? I see this about TTYD, and it's getting a remake, which isn't even out yet. There's a clip, they did a hammer, and the character made an expression. I saw it have like 40k likes. They just added expressions to your partners getting hit. It's very simple things that can be added that can make this game and franchise just a boom, stock up and I hope they do it. Again, I had the privilege of playing the point of this video, the main kind of like highlight of Crash here. This one of Return of Cortex, Wrath of Cortex rather. I had the privilege of playing as a kid, and it was awesome. It was great. I was like, what the hell? I was very annoyed playing it, as you know, the trials and all that stuff is difficult. And as a kid, it's like, oh my god, let me get through this. It's hell on earth, but it's difficult fun. Difficult hard and difficult fun are a bit different, but they change a lot. It was easy enough to do, but too hard to do easily. And I think that's where they toe the line perfectly on Crash games, but it's just, we need much more new elements, much more new implementations, and this game is just stocks up. I mean, there's not much different from this franchise to others in what it's done of its gameplay, but exactly that point is what would make it so easily a success. It has the foundation there. If they just put some more care into mechanics that could be updated, more nuanced and more cared for, it'd be awesome. It'd be perfect. I hope the Crash franchise does one day thrive again. Right now it's not. Maybe a time will come. Focusing on gameplay. You see nowadays a lot of games have good stories and good gameplay, right? While I do think that is a thing that is possible for many franchises, I do not think that is something that needs to be as sought as maybe it seems. Now let me get into detail on this, because clearly you're thinking like, well, I want both. Clearly I want both. So why would I not want them to make both? I want the game to succeed, or I want the franchise to succeed. What would you focus more on if you could? If you were a developer, what would you focus more time on? Because if you are a developer on a company and on a franchise that's kind of in the gutter, or, you know, more in the mud than in the water, I guess you could say, if that analogy works, you are going to have very stringent resources allocated to what you're doing. So if you're thinking, what can, realistically, we're not trying to, you know, let's spend $50 million on Crash Bandicoot. Yes, sir, this is GTA 6 redone. That's not realistic. We're being realistic here. What can you optimize better to an extent of a gameplay or a story? If I'm thinking here, and I'm thinking of Crash Bandicoot, Wrath of Cortex, the gameplay is the thing, right? I already mentioned some aspects. I mentioned the similarities to other franchises like Mario with the Aku Aku mask, with the more even so than that, the depth of kind of revitalizing the idea of prior systems, of prior games. Nothing's going to be 100% original. That's just nothing that can exist. There's way too many things that do exist that are super close to original, but are still a baseline of something else. Look at look at Elden Ring. There's a lot of aspects from that that's like, oh, they're giving me like a Skyrim energy. Let me look at God of War. Let me look at all these others that are very popular games, very good games, very great, fantastic things that exist. No hate to them, but there's no complete 1000% originality. If we're looking at gameplay aspects, it would be much easier for a company to go through, look at what they've done prior, see kind of the loop they've created of what they've done in the past, or at least one thing that they've done, and see what it's done in the past is success versus its failure, which this game didn't have much failure. I guess the story is a little bit of a failure, but again, you're doing a trade-off here, which I wouldn't mind for. It's just what you gotta have to do with some, you know, early sequence of a fixture. Now, big companies and big series shouldn't need to trade off, but that's because they're already established. I know a lot of them do, but they shouldn't need to. But my point being that if you were trying to think Crash, Wrath of Cortex, well, this game, I like the gameplay. I was here for that, you know, Ninja Gaiden, or however you say it, you know, style of precision and accuracy and, well, fulfillment, because I beat a hard-ass game. That's what most are thinking of. I'm not thinking of, alright, well, let me look at the Crash series here. Neo Cortex, my bestie and Crunch. They are characters. Like, sure, they're cool, funny, even to an extent. They're not terrible characters. Cool designs. I mean, I like the designs a lot, actually, Crunch and Neo Cortex. But I'm not thinking of them in this similar vein to, let me look at, Vivian from the Thousand Year Door. Let me look at Shadow or Silver even from Sonic. Like, if I look at these other franchises, I'm not going to be able to. And again, this is the trade-off. This is why we're going through this here. You're understanding that these other games have already established mascots for what their mascots are. Shadow being villainous, but still not a bad guy type of vibe. Silver being kind of this hero of his own time, being a future Trunks wannabe from, Dragon Ball Z, but like being his own kind of variant of it. And it's cool. These are mascots that people recognize. You look at Sonic, you look at a blue sphere, and you see kind of, hair flippering through. You're like, Sonic. Or you look at a red hat with a white patch, and you're thinking Mario. You don't have to see the end. You think Mario. Crash. I would much more prefer, at least from what I see, I'm looking at sales, I'm looking at everything that's pre-established from the successes. Even with the trilogy, it's much more of a gameplay thing. I don't think there's much story at all in the trilogies. That's like differential to what the originals were anyways. But it's much more a gameplay thing of kind of revitalizing. Again, I say that word so much because it is very important in this sequence. Much more revitalizing what was already existent in its peak of the gameplay over the story. So that's the first thing they'd have to change. Make their gameplay much more, not modernized. I don't like that word here because this game was not modernized when it came out. It was much more old school when it came out, and it succeeded. So what we do is we do it to an extent of, look, we go through, see what succeeded in the past gameplay, and then implement new features from other games. Not new games, not full-on new games. Let's look at Super Mario Odyssey. Let's look at implementations from different genres of games and games that are like our own of, this kind of Nintendo era aspect, and implement things from there. Because again, I'm reiterating points because it's important. You cannot be 100% original. That is not a thing that can exist. You can be 99.999999999% original. This video is not fully original. While it's an idea that I caught up with and thought of in my own head, I'm sure there's something like it that already exists. This premise of kind of how the Crash trilogy and how Crash in general has had a decline and a way to make an incline, I'm sure that already exists. Take ideas from other IPs, not steal them, goddamn, but take ideas that you would feel as a company or as a player would be a fixture or a possible savior. Again, kind of cut out the story element here until you actually get good gameplay, because what are people going to play more? The gameplay or the cutscenes? The gameplay. They kind of get any establishment, and I'm not a developer, so I can't give any specific details. I'm just giving some baseline, like Mario Odyssey, Super Mario Sunshine. Like, these are games with very high mechanics, and you actually have to, you gotta think. Like, do you see the stuff you can do in Super Mario Sunshine? Like, realistically, look at that game and talk to me about a long line, backward into a forward into a backward into like a hover into a spray nozzle. Like, you can do 97 different things. This game came out very close time frame to Crash, where if I miss this pitfall by this, tiny hair of a margin, dead. Do you see how there's actually like a similarity to a vein of, yes, there's stringency, yes, there's restriction, but we can open that, still make it strict, the game, but we can open that. And that's what I really need this company to start doing, because I wish I played more Crash as a kid. I wish I played the trilogy much earlier than I did. It would be such an easy success, because all you need to do is not modernize, but just establish a good gameplay loop that is not from the olden days fully, fine, but you see this other situation, you see this other game where it didn't have crazy story. Again, look at the last game we just mentioned of Super Mario Sunshine. What's the story there? Peach kidnapped. Oh my god. Oh wait, she's free. Oh, gotta fight out. Come on. If Mario could do these cool ass implementation mechanics, why couldn't another franchise that had as much success at its peak that Mario did at one of its peaks?